Hello, everyone. Did you miss us? We were gone last week because we were taking a break. As I like to call it, we were taking like a Sufi mental health weekend. And I think it did us some good. We are happy to be back. I am one of your two hosts, Nor Kyle.
And I'm the other one of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
Yeah, so thank you for sticking with us and for popping back into the usual routine where we meet every Sunday at 6:30 Pacific time, and we have just changed back to standard time here on the west coast of the US. So, if you didn't make it because you've been thrown off by the scheduling, just remember you can use a time zone converter, and you can find one at like timeanddate.com. They have a good one. We are, as I said, in Pacific time. And yeah, just do a double check to make sure that if you want to join us live, you'll be able to coordinate and pop in and join us, as many cool people have this evening, which is wonderful.
Yeah, this
So,
is where the cool kids hang out.
yes. Unlike in high school, where I did not hang out with the cool kids, but
There were no cool kids but you.
you make your own people. You find your own people. Yeah. So, do we have any announcements to make, Mushtaq?
Um, Many interesting things are happening. We're not going to tell you about them yet.
Always so sketchy. All right. Yes. So you'll have to just wait on those as we are trying to pull everything together so that we can have cool things to share with you guys.
Yeah, the important announcements are like this video.
Ah, yes,
That
the
little
YouTube
button down
spiel.
there with the thumbs up. Hit that sucker. Yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can't do that if you're just watching this on Zoom with us. But
Yeah.
I mean, go to YouTube, like the video, like
All
it
right.
using 6 different accounts, and
Leave a comment.
subscribe to the Nine Sided Circles channel because we do cool stuff and we do weird stuff, weirdly
Yes.
cool stuff. And make a comment. Leave us a comment in the comment section. We've been getting some really interesting comments over the last few weeks, especially, and we're trying to get to them all. But we're excited for your comments. We're collecting all of your comments and we're going to take them down to someplace and turn them in for bottle caps.
That would be nice. We could use the money.
Yeah.
So, yes, we are kind of taking a deeper dive into something that is fundamental to our approach into the Enneagram this week. And that's why we called it the anatomy of the Enneagram, huh?
Yeah. We've over the last few years talked about different Enneagrams and how to do this Enneagram and how to do that Enneagram. But there is this meta position of the Enneagram that you need to understand if you're going to be able to lay out various events and processes on the Enneagram. You got to know what the meta pattern is. So tonight we're going to talk about the meta pattern, which is very exciting. Look at me, I'm incredibly excited.
Woo! And I think it might be a good idea to add this perhaps to our Enneagram playlist so
Oh, it will.
that,
Yeah.
it can offer kind of a fundamentals overview for folks who may not have gotten this covered in previous videos and may be wondering about how this works exactly. So I'll try to make sure that we do that. Anywho, where should we start?
I don't know. Where do you want to start?
So I know in our blurb, we mentioned that this is, oh gosh, what was it? The something hieroglyph hieroglyph of a universal language.
Yep, the fundamental hieroglyph of a
Yes,
universal language. Yes.
thank you.
What the heck does that even mean?
Yeah, that's where I figured might be a good idea to
Yeah.
start.
So the idea is that the Enneagram is a way of understanding pretty much everything. Not that it will teach you anything, but it will give you the tools by which you can learn about things. I think of it like a slide rule. Most of you probably don't know what a slide rule is, do you?
Mm-mm. I mean, I do because you told me, but
Yes. So when I was a youngin', a pocket calculator was called a slide rule. It was a ruler, and it had the middle section, which would move back and forth independent of the outside sections, and it had this clear plastic thingy that would move along the top. And if you knew how to use it, you could do calculations on the slide rule. You could do logarithms on the slide rule. You could add, subtract, multiply, divide. You could do all of these cool things. And once you learned to do it, you could do it almost as fast as a pocket calculator.
an electronic one.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think that hand calculators caught up to the slide rule until probably the Texas Instruments 65.
Mm.
And all of a sudden you could outdo a slide rule. So the Enneagram is like a slide rule, a round one. And you can use it to figure stuff out, but only if you understand what each point represents and what the patterns represent. There are 3 patterns and 9 points. And you have to understand them. So I'm going to stare at this and figure out where the hell they put the screen sharing.
Let us see. Did they update it for you?
Yeah, there it is.
Pesky Zoom.
Pesky Zoom. Let's pull up an Enneagram and take a quick look at it.
There we are.
There we are. So this is all color coded. We have, like I said, the 3 parts, and those are this triangle, these weird looking lines, which are usually called the moving lines, and the circle.
Yeah, so we can see that we've got the triangle, that's red, and we've got what we call the moving lines, the weird, geometric shape, that's green, and then we've got the circle, which is blue.
Yep. And we have the equator, which is gray because it's hidden.
Yep, and we've got our best friend, the bee, in the center.
And for the inevitable person who wants to tell me that that's a wasp, it is not a wasp. This is the Egyptian hieroglyph for bee. Look it up.
So, there you go. Preemptive answer to inevitable questions.
Yes. Okay, so we look at this, and the first thing we look at is the numbers. You'll notice that up here 0 and 9 are at the same point. That's because they're basically the same thing. It's like magic. Then we have 1 through 9 going around, or 1 through 8 going around to the 9. And the blue circle, you'll see the little purple arrows here. The blue circle represents time, sequential time, clock time, the kind of time that we all hate but have to put up with. And this is important because from one perspective, every process and event moves through sequential time. And you can go back and look at the Enneagram of the kitchen, the Enneagram of everything that we've ever done, an Enneagram of the hero's journey, whatever. And you'll see that they all follow this, first of all, the sequential pattern going around. But before we even get there, we have this red line, which is a triangle. By the way, if you want to make your own Enneagrams, you just simply take a circle and starting at the top, mark it every 40 degrees all the way around until you get back to the top. And that will give you 9 marks. At 9, 3, and 6, you draw this triangle. And at 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, and 8, you make these funny lines, and you do them from 1 to 4 to 2 to 8 to 5 to 7, then back to 1. That gives you your Enneagram. This is one way to do it, and it's the way I'm pretty sure Gurdjieff invented this, or somebody very close to him did, who taught it to him. Because before this, one usually used the tetractys, which is the Pythagorean Enneagram. Does exactly the same thing, but
a bunch of triangles.
Yeah, this is prettier.
Yep. Easier to use as we're demonstrating it here. You can
The
do similar
tetractys
things.
is you can do everything that the Enneagram does on the tetractys, but it requires a little bit more understanding. This makes it simpler.
Visually a lot easier. Yeah.
So you'll notice over here on the left, we have the 3 forces. And if you were to lay out an event on the Enneagram, you would start calculating the event by asking yourself, what are the 3 forces that will be in this event? And the rule is there are always 3 forces. If you don't have all 3 forces, you have a broken event. It's not going to work. It's going to fall apart on you somewhere. You need to have all 3 forces. We call these the first is called the function. The second is called the being. And the third is called the will. So up here at 0, 9 is the function. Here at 3 is the being. And here at 6 is the will. The function is always cyclical. It breathes in and out. It's very mysterious. And again, we talk about the kitchen. There's a reason that the kitchen is the first Enneagram taught, usually. Up here, what is the function of the kitchen? It's to make food. Without making food, the kitchen has no meaning. And the kitchen will go through the process of making food and return to its ready state and then do it again and again and again, unless you blow yourself up or something. But it is cyclical. Using the analogy of the kitchen again, and we will put a link up to the Enneagram playlist, and we did a specific Enneagram on the kitchen, which you can go and watch, and then you'll understand what the hell we're talking about. But I'm assuming that if you've been hanging around with us for this long, you might have already encountered this material. If not, this goes with everything else we've taught.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the being down here at 3, the being is always transformed irrevocably. Once it is transformed, you cannot untransform it. In the kitchen, here we have the kitchen. Here we have the idea of the preparation of food at 0, 9. Here we have the food itself. And we'll get back to that in a moment. Point 3 is the will. And this is the purpose of everything. In the Enneagram of the kitchen, this is the community. This is the people who will eat the food. And without all 3 of these, nothing works. No kitchen, no food. You can eat raw materials. That's it. No food, it leaves you with a clean kitchen and hungry people. No community leaves you with food sitting on the stove going bad. So you need all 3. So when you are building an Enneagram, the first thing you ask yourself is, where are the 3 forces in the process that I'm about to do? So who can think of a process, an event that they can do with an Enneagram?
Who wants to give it a shot?
No, nobody? Okay,
Oh, Todd. Todd, sorry.
go for it, Todd.
The pictures are tiny. You'll have to unmute yourself. I had to mute you earlier.
Oh,
There you
the
go.
the carpenter's shop.
The carpenter shop. Okay, so the carpenter shop is not a process. It's a thing.
It's a thing. It is. Let's say the process of woodworking.
Yes. What are you going to build?
That depends um, on the will over here, the customer. What do the customers
Pick
want?
something.
Okay, a table.
Okay,
The
so
yeah.
that's a good thing to do. And that's what we're going to work with for the rest of the night, the carpenter shop. This is all your fault, Todd.
Thanks, Todd.
So the carpenter shop is going to sit up here. The idea of a place to do woodworking. The raw materials are going to sit here. And the customer is going to sit here at 6. Now, we know that the customer wants a table. He has said so. He comes to your specialty woodworking shop and says, "Oh, master woodworker, make me a table." This is where the green lines come in. We call them the Murshid lines. Murshid means guide. It's the idea of if this were the kitchen, it would be the master chef. But in the case of the carpenter shop, this is the master carpenter. He or she is the person who moves along these lines. And it's very, very special how they do it.
Yeah, I think in other videos we may have described these as the teaching lines or,
Yeah.
something along those lines. It's all the same thing.
Yep. Yeah, I'm just using a slightly more traditional word.
Yeah, and I like that. It's a nice change of pace.
Yeah. Another thing they call it, I know some of the Gurdjieffians call this the line of supervision.
Mm.
Yeah. But that always sounds a little like,
Yeah, that's a little.
Yeah. So it's the Murshid's line. The line of the guide, of the master worker. So the master woodworkers is up here, and he opens his shop
Now, where are you pointing to?
to the 09 line.
There you go. Yeah, the arrow is pretty tiny.
Yeah, sorry. And it moves here along the line of time to point 1. Point 1 is the wood shop ready to work. The place is clean. All the tools are in their proper place, and the workers show up. We're going to assume that this is an actual shop and there are people there, just because it makes it easier for me to describe this. It can be described with just one person too, but it's more fun with, many hands make for light work or something like that. So the journeyman and apprentice woodworkers show up for the day, and the master woodworker says, we're going to build a table. And so he comes to here. He says, pull out these tools, but not those tools.
So that's at point 2.
That's at point 2. This is preparing everything you're going to need to make your table. In cooking, it's called mise en place, having everything ready to do your cooking. And I love doing this. As Nora will tell you, I love to cook. And my favorite way to do it is to get everything laid out for what I'm making, all the spices, all of the materials, all the bowls that I'm going to need, all of the pans and whatever. And it's just there, ready to go.
Cover the counter.
Yeah, and I can just start cooking, and I don't have to go looking for anything. So that happens at 2. Now at 3, what is going to be transformed if you're making a table? The wood, right? The wood is going to be transformed, and it's going to be transformed irrevocably. Once you cut a piece of wood, you cannot uncut it. That's where you get the old saying, measure twice, cut once. Or in my case, measure 3 or 4 times, cut once. Keep your fingers crossed. So here at 3, wood comes into this, and it comes in from a different Enneagram, but it touches here at this point. Here at 4, all of the workers are measuring and preparing and getting everything laid out to start cutting pieces and putting the table together. This little gray line, the equator, as you are moving from 4 to 5, you cannot move back once you've moved there. If you try, everything fails. So everything's ready. The master woodworker says, go. You pull out your saws and you start cutting. That takes us to here.
So we've moved from point 4 across the equator to point 5.
Point 5 is called the point of greatest attention. And I'm going to put this graphic up on the Circle forum for everybody who wants it. So you can stare at it and see if you can actually figure this out. So point 5. You are cutting the wood, you are drilling holes, you are making joints, you're joining the wood, you're gluing things, and the table is coming together. When the table is together, you get to point 6, where the customer enters. And at point 7, the table is presented. And if it's done well, it's well received. And it gets you to point 8 of, I got a table and I'm happy about it. And I'm going to sit at this table and eat dinner or watch TV or play cards or whatever you're going to do. And that brings the woodworking shop back to 9, where it's ready to go again. And that's why this is cyclical. Now, we haven't talked about
These
the
green
Murshid line.
lines, yeah.
And this is what makes everything possible. The master woodworker does not move around the line of time. He moves along the Murshid lines, the guidelines.
You've got
And
little orange arrows.
yeah,
on
little
those
orange
lines.
arrows. I could make this a little bigger, I think.
Yeah, I think if you can, that would be great. Yes. Excellent. Perfect.
Forget that I have all of this control over it that I don't remember. Okay, so the master woodworker meets his assistants at 1. As his assistants are moving to 2, he looks down to 4. He literally sees into the future. At 1, he visualizes the table. He knows what he wants to build. The workers don't know yet. They haven't seen the plans. But the master woodworker has the plan for the table inside his head. And in the old days, you didn't need to draw out plans. In some places, that's the old days was yesterday. When I lived in Tanzania, they called them fundis. Fundi means a craftsman. And you would go to a woodworker, fundi, and tell him what you wanted. And he would just put it together for you. He didn't have any plans he worked from. He worked from the plan that was inside of his head. And if he was good, what he made for you was perfect. And this is the kind of mastery that we're talking about here. So up here, the master woodworker looks down to 4 and goes, okay, this is what I want to do. This is the kind of table I want to make. And then he bops up to 2 as the helpers move from 1 to 2, and he meets them at 2 and says, okay, you're going to need to pull out these tools for this. Then he sends them on down to pick up the wood at 3. He looks to 8. Remember what happens
2
at 8?
to 8 now. Yeah.
Yeah. 8 is a happy customer with his table. He understands that the outcome that he is looking for is a satisfied customer who gets the kind of table he wants, the kind of table he expects. And the master woodworker has to understand what the customer wants here. From there, he moves down to 5.
So from 8 to 5.
To 8 to 5, while the workers are moving from 3 to 4. The workers know the measurements now. They've been told the measurements and all of this sort of thing. And they start working. The moment they lay saw to wood, they cross the equator. And they are here at the area of most attention, where they have to be the most awake to what they're doing to accomplish their task. Now, it's interesting because from 5, the master craftsman moves to 7. 5 to 7. And what is 7? 7 is delivering the table. So the customer comes in here.
At 6.
At 6. The assistants carry the table to the customer and go, plump, here's your table.
At 7.
At 7. And of course, the customer is utterly delighted. And he moves to 8, which is using the table. But the master craftsman moves along this line back to 1, where he gets the wood shop ready for the next project. Puts all the tools back, sweeps up the sawdust, arranges any wood that's left over, goes through his inventory, and all of that sort of thing.
In preparation for the next thing, whatever that might be.
Yep. Might do a bed the next day. The secret to the master craftsman is the ability to see into the future. Now, Nora and I have talked about this ad nauseum. What makes an adult human being is the quality of being able to future pace your actions so that you can understand the consequences of a potential action and only choose the actions that will get you where you want to go. And one of the secrets to the Murshid line is that the master craftsman of whatever sort has to be an adult. They have to be able to future pace. And at the same time, they have to have empathy, because if they don't have empathy for their workers, they will overwork them or underpay them or any number of stupid things that make for disgruntled workers who end up putting 5 legs on the table just to spite you. So does this make sense so far?
Yeah, any questions?
Yeah, this is a good time.
Or thoughts? You can pitch in.
Yeah, this is a good time to either give us thoughts, ask questions. We will make up answers to any questions that we don't understand.
Bonnie,
Okay, I have a question.
yes.
For the Enneagram to work, the first thing you need is a master, right?
No, the first thing you need is an intention. You need to
Okay.
know what the function is. A master you need for certain things, but this isn't about having a master or being a master. And when I say master, I don't mean it in the sense of masters and slaves. I mean it in the sense of somebody who has mastered their craft.
Expertise.
Yeah.
Somebody who's an expert.
Yeah. But you can do this with anything, literally with anything that has a process aspect to it.
So in that case, I am the guiding line.
If you're doing this, yes, you would stand in the center. That's our B friend here. This represents the master craftsman, or in this case, the master Bonnie.
Okay.
So if you were going to cook a meal for your kids, you would be taking this position, especially if your kids were going to help you. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's a disaster, depending on the kids.
Yeah.
But it would follow the same pattern. The only difference is here, instead of wood, it would be food. And here, instead of being a customer, it would be the kids entering to eat. And that might be something that you do all by yourself.
Yeah, but I have to have that intention and the vision, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
you have to have the intention. You have to have the vision. You have to know where you want to go with this. Have you ever tried cooking something when you don't know what you're going to cook?
No. No, I
Yeah, it doesn't
experimented,
work
but then
well.
I knew.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, or if you know, in my case, I had a writing thing to do this week, and I had to first, there's the seed of the idea, the purpose for doing the thing.
I could stare at everybody.
Yeah, and then I have to take that idea and feed it into something that can be fleshed out with details and with narrative and with a point to the whole thing. And the finished product is something that I'm already imagining when I start. Maybe it'll look a bit different in the end, but given that I have been writing for most of my life, I have a sense of what I want the end product to feel like, to sound like. And so I can use that to guide me through the process of writing.
Right. I get it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We got tons of messages that we
we
have to
do.
attend to. Yes.
And
And
Todd,
they're good messages.
they
I
are.
like
So
these
I'll go in order here.
Yeah, please do.
Alka says, "This is so great. Thank you." Yes, during the retreat, we used this as a way to work through getting meals prepared and everything in the kitchen. And we made a joke out of like the person who is guiding in the kitchen being the bee for that evening. So that was a lot of fun. And Ian says, very interesting way of naming the three forces. And overall, exceptionally interesting explanations. Glad you think so, Ian.
Yeah.
As I recall, you have a lot of experience studying the Enneagram, so we appreciate hearing that. Todd says he has a question. I'm gonna read Ian's remarks and then
Okay. Then we'll get back to
okay,
yeah,
so
because
that's kind
what
of a
Todd asks is relevant to Ian's remarks. So
okay, yes. So Ian says, continues, I've been thinking about how you might apply this to a silicon chip factory. I suspect that you might have to go out to several, possibly at least two, levels of enneagrams outside of the main one in order to capture much of what has to go on in that kind of process. In other words, it's a complex, multi-layered process.
yes.
And continues to say, having a bit more difficulty applying it, so software engineering, which was my profession for many years. Much of it can be made to fit, but unlike cases where there is a physical thing that can be transformed, I haven't been able to put a name to what is being transformed in that case.
Yeah, this is the one time when I feel like going and waking up Palin so she can get in on this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our friend Palin has a very interesting relationship to this realm of the digital, which for many of us does not feel tangible, but for her, like I said, she has a unique perspective in which she is able to relate to the digital seemingly non-tangible in a way that makes it tangible, and it's very interesting.
Yeah. And fortunately, Todd is also a software engineer. So
Yes.
we
Todd
have
says the release is the irrevocable event.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, the release of the product.
Yeah, that's something that Blizzard is
Yeah.
finding out right about now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So,
So with software, all software does something. Usually does a lot of things, but it does a main something. Just about everybody on the planet, the first line of code that they learn to write is one that returns the response, hello world. Anybody remember that? Yeah.
yes, we have nods.
Yeah.
Yes.
That kind of dates us here. And that's the event. You're sending a message. So I'm trying to think of something that won't get too complicated. Say what?
I was just clearing my throat and saying, excuse me.
Yeah. So I get an idea for a software package that I want to produce. Let's say a game. You know, the game is going to require a lot of stuff. And this gets us back to Todd's question. Let's get to Todd's question real quick, because then I can hopefully pull this all together.
So Todd asked, can any of the points or transitions be spun off as their own Enneagram? And yes, this does dovetail with what Ian was saying about layers of
And the answer is yes, all of them, but especially 0.9, 3, and 6.
So that's the triangle in the middle.
Because each of those has to have something come in from a process outside of the main process. So with the carpenter, the process of growing wood, the process of harvesting and preparing wood are all different Enneagrams. And they have to go through all of those correctly for the wood to arrive at your workshop. And that also includes the Enneagram of delivering wood. So when you really get into this, you get all of these nested programs.
Yeah. I mean, you can just imagine all of them connected, all of these Enneagrams.
Yeah, I'm a 3D graphic artist, and I tried to make a 3D design of how Enneagrams connect in 3 space going out, and it gave me a headache. And I think it melted my CPU. And then my monitor was translated to another dimension. It was very sad. I'm never going to do that again.
Yes, Todd says, I am making one in steel. Are you? Very interesting.
Yeah, quality control has to occur at pretty much all of the points, but especially at 5. That's why 5 is called the point of most attention, also known as the dark night of the soul.
Right. I figured I wouldn't get too deeply into that, but it can be considered the point of tediousness too.
Yeah.
You don't have to bring that attitude to it, but often that is what comes up at this point, where it's just like, oh my god, are we done yet? When does it end? So hold on to that and remember that it is indeed part of the process to do a little bit of slogging before you come out on the other side.
Yeah. And the truth of the matter is that Enneagrams connect together for even the most simple process in very complex ways, to the point where it's difficult to logic them out. You have to intuit them. Intuition means that you've trained your unconscious to do the grunt work for you and just deliver the answer, which it is more suitable for doing in a lot of cases than your rational mind, if that makes sense. You got to train your intuition with your rational mind so that it doesn't make stupid mistakes. Yeah, Ian, you are right.
Ian says, in software, that would probably imply going back and forth between 5 and 4, finding a bug, send it back to be fixed, and so on. Yes, Palon is intimately familiar with that kind of thing.
Yeah, though it's much more complex than that. It's find a bug.
Yeah.
And then management will try and sweep the bug under the table so that it doesn't mess with funding. but the bug will be bad enough that it keeps popping up, so they have to take it back. So whatever software engineer was heading the project gets blamed and sacrificed, and his minion fixes the bug and sends it back, and rinse, repeat.
Also, the master needs to know when it's a bug, when it's a new requirement, or when it's a change of the issue. So there's a lot, it's very complex. I agree. A lot of decision making.
I think there has to be an entire different Enneagram for the testing process when it comes to software.
Yeah, I see some nods in agreement. So I think you're right. That's probably an ordeal unto itself.
Yeah, the Enneagram of testing would be a separate Enneagram that dovetails in with this. This is why I say every
That's
point
true.
has its Enneagram.
Yeah. So you imagine that 0.5 and then how that is intersected with a whole other Enneagram that is like a loop back and swings off into 0.6. Yes. So
And 0.6, you know, if it's
ideally
doing software, that's when the large multi-billion-dollar mega corporation that asked your company to make this software sits down and you say, oh, here it was. It's easy. We need to charge you twice as much as we said because it had some cost overruns, but we have it for you. Isn't it shiny? Is it pretty? I've been in Silicon Valley too damn long.
We've heard too many terror and horror stories at this point to not be a little jaded. Yes, as Ian says, you've characterized that exceptionally well. Well, we
speak from experience.
Maybe not direct experience for someone like myself, but I have seen the suffering.
Direct experience for me.
Yeah. Yep.
Those times when I have both worked in the software industry and regretted working in the software industry.
As Todd says, rolling back and repeating the 4 to 5 transition at a greater level of frustration. Yep. So, any other questions or thoughts?
I had a question, Noor.
Sure.
This is with respect to, in the beginning, you said that when we were in Sweden, we were doing this Enneagram of the kitchen practically while we were there. Just curious. So there were times when the ovens were not working and we were running to the other building to go. I'm just curious, at what point we could have prepared, because everybody was having a different kind of an experience with that oven. There was only one person, for some reason, nothing went wrong with that person. But all of us, I'm just curious, how, at what point we could have prepared ourselves for that.
I mean, I would consider perhaps that maybe there could be an Enneagram of inspecting the utilities.
So separate.
Yeah,
so
that would be
Enneagram.
Separate. Yeah.
Enneagram, that should have this. Okay.
Because ideally, the kitchen ready for work takes place in a context in which all of that stuff has been worked out already.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I mean, in an ideal world, right? But,
I was just curious because
it's a good question. Yes.
This is a perfect example of things working, and I learned quite a lot. I think I'm going to test it for one of the event that's going to happen at my house on 14th. I'm going to play with it. But I was just curious. There are some gotchas, right? Like that. All our Learning was from that oven.
And we also have to remember that chaos is always, you know,
That's
hanging
right.
out on the periphery to mess up our plans. So there's that too. Yes. All right. So Yusuf, wait, first of all,
Yeah.
do you
Ian
want to
has,
start with Ian's
yeah,
questions? Oh, Bonnie also was unmuted, by the way.
okay. So let's start with,
I was okay. So I was just wondering, for more complex processes, we'd need more and more Enneagrams, right?
not necessarily. Some very complex processes can be done on one Enneagram with just
Okay.
the 3 shock points bringing things in. It just depends on the process.
Mm-hmm.
This is why you need a master craftsman directing things.
Right. Okay.
And Ian has said, I'm wondering where management fits into this, assuming that the master craftsman, in the case of the project leader, in this case is the project leader and or software architect. Management is the customer for the project manager.
Because you're producing a product for their
Yeah.
approval, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So good. Ian says that makes sense.
And Yusuf,
Yusuf in Turkey asks, what happens if the cycle is not closed, if the job is not done?
you lose all of your energy. All the energy that you have put into the process basically gets wasted.
Especially if you've made it to the point where you've begun to enact irrevocable change.
Yep. Yeah, you're sitting there with a half-done table. Nobody wants to buy it. You've lost your money, you've lost your time, you've lost your effort. Everything's gone to hell, and it's harder to get a customer the next time around because they all know that you didn't finish your project.
Mushtaq, but my understanding of this was that at point 3 and 4, we can still save some part of it, right?
Yeah,
It's
you
only
can-
once we cross the table,
Yeah,
the equator.
once you cross the equator, if you don't finish, you're pretty much doomed. If you have stopped at 4 and you haven't started altering things, then you could sell off the wood for some amount of money,
Right, right.
but you're still going to lose.
You've still invested time and energy that now you're like, well, okay, we'll just have to cut our losses on this one.
Where
Yeah. Where were we? We were. Oh my gosh. Where were we?
we were at finishing up this Enneagram, the Enneagram
Yes.
of talking to y'all.
There we go.
We have delivered our product.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you've done this process and you returned, you've come to 8 and back to 9. With a spiraling, is where if we're spiraling up, we're actually making a better table every time we go? Or and if we and then if you're not making the product or you're not baking a cake and you're only producing a muffin, then you're just staying in one circle and not actually growing and getting higher because you're not learning how to make those adjustments.
Yeah, if you were at a point where you are doing the same thing exactly the same way over and over again, you are stuck in mechanical behavior.
Mm.
and then you would not be a master craftsman.
I'm glad you brought up the imagery of the spiral, because that's another thing that I often find great to bring up, is that this is not a flat, repetitive process. This is something where if you're bringing your best to it, you're bound to improve all the time. Yeah.
And in the case of the wood shop, everybody improves. All of the journeyman craftsmen, all of the apprentice craftsmen, and the master all improve every time they successfully complete a project like this.
Yeah, Mustaq, in my software case, what we used to do was we used to understand our customer at 7 and 8 and 6 very well. And the team would also understand the customer very well and the software very well. So in the next round at 1, 2, 3, we used to add things to the software which were future thinking, right? And we would show some prototypes to the customer in our meetings during 5 and 4 as to where we're taking. And that used to become our new work, where they used to love it. And even the older version used to be cheaper for them. And the newer version was, and the team loved it because they were always thinking out of the box. The customer and team became very good.
And that's a very good
members.
Example of the ongoing process.
Yeah. And Ian says, that's a very interesting perspective about how creativity works its way into this. Yes. I mean, for me, that's like a matter of course almost, because I think we can sort of, in some ways, we can take for granted that no process is ever going to be exactly the same because of various extenuating circumstances, our energy levels, who's involved, what's going on, all of those things, timing. But can we learn how to go with the flow of that? Can we learn how to take that into account every time we go through a new process and become more sophisticated in our ability to adapt and to think outside of the box and to add new creative spins to whatever it is that we're doing? So that's one way I like to think about this, as something more than, I mean, because in the fourth way tradition, we're always supposed to be moving away from mechanicalness, from a kind of predictability that has us doing the same things over and over. Yep, improvisation, as Ian says, in the face of difficulties is clearly something that has to happen. Yes, 100% agreed. Todd says, I have an issue with that transcend mechanical thinking. Please say more, Todd. Yeah. Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, part of I'm having to pick up 2 new crafts now at the same time, and I'm realizing that a big part of what will eventually become mastery is the ability to not have to think about the things that have to be repeated. One has to pay attention to them, but being able to do them mechanically and automatically is a necessary part of being able to play with and create with those tasks. Like today, punching, drilling, with blacksmithing, punching, drifting, welding, until those processes are mechanical and no longer have to be thought about, you can't explore the possibilities or achieve more than a very basic level of skill with them. The fundamentals have to be dialed in so you don't think about them.
I get what you're saying about that
Yeah.
transition between, developing conscious competence to more unconscious competence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
we're talking,
yes.
what we're talking about is not exactly what you're talking about.
Mm.
Okay, okay.
Though I see
Yeah. And
what
you
you're
make
saying.
a good point, because you have to be able to trust your unconscious behaviors to do what needs to be done. This goes without saying. Blacksmithing is a great example of that, because if you try and do a lot of blacksmithing consciously, you screw everything up, especially if you're working with coal. You end up burning things. Yes, he knows what I'm talking about. But at the same time, when we talk about unconscious, when you've been driving down the highway for miles and miles, and all of a sudden you notice that you don't remember the last 25 miles that you drove? That's the kind of thing that we're talking about as mechanical, where you are not present to what you're doing. When you are at a master's level, whether it's smithing or woodworking or anything else, you don't have to consciously think about what you're doing. You know when the steel is hot enough to pull out and start working on. You don't have to think your way through that. But at the same time, you're not oblivious. Your conscious mind is there. You are present to the process. And if you're not present to the process, you're probably going to burn the shit out of yourself. I've seen that happen more than once.
So it's also a developing of intuition then,
Yeah.
In the sense of that meaning, you don't have to think about it so much as you sense it.
Yeah, it's a matter of presence and absence. You can allow your unconscious to do all of these different tasks, but you want to be present while it's doing it. You don't want to be absent. And I think that's the distinction that we need to make in that. Other than that, you're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
All this stuff has to be able to reach a level of unconscious competence.
Yeah, I mean, we've also talked about creating intentional programming, right? Where you train yourself into a set of actions so that you can do them in a swift, well-managed way. But yeah, I think that there is this aspect of being present that happens even as we're allowing that program to run. And that takes training, that takes development, which is exactly what you're working on right now. Yep. Thanks, Todd.
Yeah, and Ian makes a salient
Yes.
observation here.
Ian says, yes, there is a similar aspect in musical performances. Obviously, the mechanics of performance have to be there every time, but then the performance also has to react to the audience or other circumstances of the particular event. Yeah, there's this give and take where you are feeling into, again, sensing the context of the moment and allowing that to have some level of impact on the way that the mechanics are being expressed. Again, you have to be present for that in order to sense into that accurately. Yes.
What a great class today to understand how you can be growing your spiritual side along with everything that you're doing, every process. Thank you. I wish I learned this when I was 20. So, thank you.
Thank you, Alka. And I appreciate you saying that, because that is essentially what we strive to do, is to take every normal, seemingly mundane thing about everyday life and point out how all of it is just another way to live into spiritual practice, if we want to call it that, or cultivation. You know, it doesn't matter what words we use for it. I think that the way you described it, Alka, was great. Shuri.
Hello. Every week I have to create a class plan, and every week I struggle. So, any of you who don't know me, I teach stretching, and so every week I have to try and keep it a little fresh, but you're still repeating similar things, and you're doing some parts over and over and over again, and bringing a kind of freshness to it, and that process to keep people interested. Oh man, it's a struggle, because I'm thinking, I have to really, as being the bee, know what the end is in mind. What is the end pose that we're sort of working towards, and make it a little bit different every week. Sometimes I switch it completely. So we go from the top of the body to the bottom of the body, or we skip the bottom of the body completely, you know, that sort of thing all the time. I found that today's class was a very clarifying explanation of the process I'm going through every week, that you are taking that material and you know what the customer wants, but they haven't actually expressed it in precise words. And so you're feeling around for it, and you're trying to get the recipe right, so to speak, so that everybody's getting a good experience. But that grind from 4 to 5 when you're doing a practice, and you can see people are like, no, we're not doing this again, are we? And then I said, wait for it, like stay there, sit in that pose. And there's a particular quad pose that we do, and I make them stay there for 5 minutes for one side. And it's like, what the hell? What's that about? And I said, you start listening to your body's giving you all sorts of argument and disagreement, and your ego's doing this and your thoughts are doing that, and it's actually really interesting to hear it on the Enneagram. You think, yep. But then when you get to the end, everybody says, I came in feeling something, but I'm left feeling something else. And it's worth going through that process, but it's every week. Every week.
I know. We go through that every week. Mushtak
I
carries
watch
the
you
brunt of
too.
it, but like
What are we
every
talking
week.
about? I don't know. It's
Yeah.
really good.
Yes, exactly. And it's the same thing. Oh my gosh, how do we bring something forth that feels purposeful and interesting, but is also making sure that we reiterate those really important things?
It's nothing is wasted. Today particularly had a coalescing effect on me today, on all the material. I've heard it over and over. I'm thinking, oh yeah, you know, so that, yeah, I appreciate that, because it is worthwhile listening back. It's worthwhile turning up to the talk. It's worthwhile continuing the practice, because there you'll go through that. It's not necessarily dark night of the soul, but it's sheer boredom. And you just think, oh, I don't know, what's going on here? What are they talking about? But yeah, so if you persist, something will happen. Something will happen that will surprise you. And sometimes a spiral is very flat, but it's going.
Subtle.
It's really the thread of a screw. There's my visual image for you. A thread of a screw. That's my spiral. No dramatic improvements, just tiny ones.
It counts. It counts. Yeah. Thanks, Shuri. Who haven't we heard from yet? Yeah, Bonnie, and then I'm gonna check in with Yusuf and Lovita.
Right. So just to add to Cherie's point, this can actually be a great tool to understand how to do something. Like many times we know what to do, but we have no idea about how to go about it. And I really appreciate both of you for this class because it's cleared so many of my doubts. I feel at ease, so thank you.
Aw, thanks, Bonnie. Yeah, I mean, that's, I feel like that's something that Mushtaq has shared with me and has been trying to share with all of us from the beginning, is that this is something that you can use as a tool for all kinds of things.
Every day
Yeah.
for things that you wouldn't even realize that you could use it for.
Yep. Something to think about.
And you can do it for things as simple as the Enneagram of taking a walk. That's, I mean, you don't get much simpler than that.
Yeah. And we have people like Chris doing like the Enneagram of community
Restoring the entire damn
gardening.
Sonora
Yeah.
Desert. Yeah.
So big and small. Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Go
Yeah,
for it.
don't have much to say, but it's when I first saw you guys put out a video on it, I was kind of skeptical of like how it would really work for everything, but it I think I like the way it gets you thinking about a process that otherwise would be unconscious, like something like writing. You could just do it without like for journaling or something, you could do it without really thinking about the end result or why you're doing it or the purpose of it. So it's nice how it like helps you clarify your aim for a lot of things. Playing a game of soccer, you can even see if you really drill down, like where it could start at one point, like starting an attack. And yeah, so it's interesting how you can really play with it and try and think of where you can have the shock points and how it would work.
Yeah. I actually have a friend who is a writer, very successful writer, and I taught him how to use the Enneagram years ago. And he uses it to this day to lay out plots for his books.
Yeah, like for fiction narratives. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, look forward to using it for that most.
Awesome. Yay. Thanks, Yusuf.
Lavita, talk to us.
I was ready to talk until you said what I was going to say. So
Say
I
it
got
again.
nothing.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
No, I was just saying every time we, like you said, every time we go through it, it's like, oh yeah, there's another thing and another thing. Um, it's just kind of like that all-purpose power tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It slices, it dices, it juliennes.
Thanks, Lavita. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that, not that it has been nice to put words to that during this talk, because I'm not sure that we've had the opportunity to do that specifically. This sense that every time you're adding all of the things that you learned, ideally, from the previous process, refining and beautifying, making more elegant each time. Yusuf in Turkey, do you have any last thoughts you might like to share? Are you good?
Yeah, I was thinking about being the universal language.
Mm.
Um, you can also use the Enneagram to understand the events around us.
Oh, yes.
And maybe when one is awake, then it's like one sits at the center of the world and time and watch all of it and understand where things are coming from and and what are the outcomes and what is the meaning of that thing that's happening. Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Yeah, and that's something that has happened throughout the ages. I mean, everybody knows that there are times when you have dervishes living in a town, you know, and they're kind of crazy and nobody wants to talk to them or anything. But one day they all vanish. 2 or 3 days later, you have Mongols at the gate. And that's because they saw it coming and they got out of there.
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse than Mongols at the gate.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent adjunct to this, is that, you know, we've covered a specific aspect of this topic today, and we've also talked at other times about exactly what you're talking about, Yusuf, in that this is a way of, it is a tool. It is obviously not the only way. We are not, you know, dogmatic in the sense of this way or no way, but it has such potential to allow us to think in these creative ways and to allow ourselves to develop a sense of foresight just by being curious about how one event perhaps sits on a point. How did we get there? How did this point, you know, come into being? What has led up to this? What are all of the spiraling enneagrams that are reaching out from that moment? Stuff to think about. So deep. Ooh. So I love that all of you have been contributing your own experiences as a way to help us all understand what's possible with the application of the Enneagram. And we've covered the gamut. We've talked about stretch therapy, we've talked about programming, we've talked about writing, we've talked about woodworking. How awesome is that? So thank you, everyone. I don't have any last thoughts to add.
Me neither.
Great talk. Yeah.
Yeah, you all
So,
did good.
thanks, everybody. And with that said, I guess it's time to go to Brady Bunch mode.
Is it?
It is.
All right. We are in Brady Bunch mode. Yay!
Yeah. So, thank you, everyone, for being here. Newcomers, old friends. So great to have you all. Wave to each other. Wave to everybody watching on the replay. And we will see you next week. Bye.
All right.